Dearly beloved, I come before you at this moment to implement a day of transparency. By now, you've heard the name Jeffrey Epstein all over the place. He's the financier, the trafficker, and a man whose name still echoes through courtrooms and conspiracy message boards and group chats. The mainstream media has mostly painted him as a monster of female trafficking. And make no mistake, he was. There's no doubt about it. But here's the story they didn't focus too much on. The fraud, the money laundering, the financial crimes that Epstein never got charged for. Only till recently, just recently, strangely enough courtesy of MSNBC, have they began to suggest other crimes in connection to the trafficking ones, and quite frankly, I'm a little disappointed that it took this long for them to do so. Because behind the mansions and private islands, there was something much darker, a billion-dollar illusion backed by offshore accounts, complicit billionaires, and institutions too powerful to fall. Even Stevie Wonder himself could see that without need for any drawn-out grandiose headline or breaking news segment on the evening news. This man was guilty of more crimes than just trafficking. And yet, the mainstream media only wanted the public to focus on that part. So, on this episode, we're going to follow the money. So let's set the stage right quick. Jeffrey Epstein, began as a junior assistant to a floor trader at Bear Stearns. We've all heard this story if you've been doing your due diligence and your research. Bear Stearns is a global investment bank, was a global investment bank headquartered in New York City, and particularly known for its role in the mortgage-backed securities market, which ultimately led to its collapse during the 2008 financial crisis. Epstein was recruited into this company with no degree in finance, no degree in business administration, or any type of degree or certification in accounting. Keep that in mind. Later, Epstein moved up the ranks and worked in the special products division at Bear Stearns as a wealth advisor, advising some of their wealthiest clients, like Seagram's president Edgar Bronfman, on complex financial instruments for maintaining their wealth. For his final role at Bear Stearns, Epstein was promoted to limited partner before leaving in 1981 due to Epstein committing a Reg D violation. What exactly is a Reg D violation, you may ask? Reg D, also known as Regulation D, is a violation that occurs when a company fails to comply with the rules and regulations set forth by the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. This happens when raising capital through private security offerings. These violations can range from failing to properly file necessary documents to improperly soliciting investors or exceeding the allowed number of non-accredited investors. Consequences of such can lead to, well, let's just say the SEC can bring civil actions against companies and individuals who violate Regulation D protocols, potentially resulting in fines, penalties, and restrictions on future offerings. This can include loss of exemptions. Violations can lead to the loss of the Regulation D exemption, meaning the company may be required to register the securities with the SEC. Another action it can enforce is investor lawsuits. Investors who have suffered losses due to Regulation D violations may file lawsuits against the company, its officers, and other parties involved in the offering. Also, damage to reputation. Violations can damage a company's reputation and make it more difficult to raise capital in the future. So which one do you think happened to Epstein? A, nothing. B, he got fired. C, he quit. D, he had to pay a fine of about, $2,500? The correct answers are C and D. He voluntarily resigned after Bear Stearns was like, hold up, slow your roller, man. You getting a little too beside yourself, and now you need to pay up. But the ego of Jeffrey Epstein gave them all the middle finger, as he had the audacity to think that a $2,500 fine situated upon him for his misdeeds was too outrageous to be requested of him, even though his actions put a multi-billion-dollar company in jeopardy. And yet, outside of that fine, no legal repercussions were taken against Epstein. So Bear Stearns failed to mark him as a bad Wall Street worker, which meant that Epstein could freely rebrand himself independently, and to do so, he would need to weasel his way into the life of just one ultra-wealthy person. So, shortly after, Jeffrey Epstein branded himself as a billionaire hedge fund manager of his very own financial trust company, LLC, in New York in 1981, and later based in the U.S. Virgin Islands after becoming a resident in 1996. Keep in mind, the Virgin Islands is a very well-known tax haven. Lex Wexner, we've all heard that name before, met Epstein around 1986. They were introduced by Wexner's close friend, Robert Meister, who ran an insurance firm that handled insurance for Wexner's first fashion store brand, The Limited. Now, whether or not Epstein planned this or it was just by sheer happenstance remains to be determined. But on one pivotal day, Epstein struck up a conversation with Meister on a commercial flight to Palm Beach. So maybe Epstein was bound to run into him amongst the circle of Palm Beach elite residents. A little side note. I'm kind of thinking about doing a piece on how Palm Beach became the Hamptons of the South for the rich and wealthy crowd, because as with many places gentrified under the blessings of America's capitalistic governing structures, Palm Beach was a regular piece of land that just so happened to be in a tropical environment until some well-off developer decided to further colonize the area. And guess what? Palm Beach also has a history of having African American residences living there before it became what it is today. It's some janky stuff in Palm Beach history, so we might come back and revisit that. But back to Epstein. So according to Vanity Fair, Meister remembered being impressed with a young Epstein, whatever that means. He was a great, now this is what he said, he was a great finesser. He also said people who knew Epstein remarked at his savant-like skill at impressing powerful older men. Jeffrey was a flatterer, said the interior designer Robert Courtier, who met Epstein in the 1980s. Jeffrey would call me every day and say, "Oh, you're so brilliant. You're the best." Epstein's friend Stuart Pivar, a founder of New York Academy of Art, said Epstein's magnetism was almost impossible to resist. If you had hundreds of millions of dollars and you knew Jeffrey, there's a high likelihood that you would give it to him. He was that good of a con man. I'm shaking my head at just all of this testimony right here. So Not long after Epstein met Meister, Epstein invited Meister to play racquetball, good old racquetball, and started turning up in the steam room at his gym while he was using it. Now, this is according to Meister. He said, "I'll be having a steam," and Epstein would come in. During one conversation, Epstein asked Meister to introduce him to Wexner. Epstein falsely said he had learned that Wexner's money manager was stealing from him. Epstein, a self-described financial bounty hunter, whatever that means, offered to help recover the funds. Now remember, he's doing this all under that LLC that's now in the Virgin Islands. It was convincing enough that Meister arranged a meeting for Epstein at Wexner's house in Aspen. Epstein was such a liar, Meister said. In Wexner's 2019 letter to his foundation, he wrote that he hired Epstein because friends recommended him as a knowledgeable financial professional. So basically, these old white men craved being falsely praised by Epstein. Yo, I have my questions. I just wonder if all this praise came from somebody that looked like, I don't know, a young man of a certain ethnicity, opposite of Epstein. Would this have gone on? Or a young woman with curly hair from an ethnicity opposite of Epstein, would this have gone on? Keep that in the back of your mind, y'all. So, soon Epstein would serve as Wexner's personal financial manager, handling nearly all of his personal finances. That's crazy. He received limited power of attorney in 1991, granting him authority to sign checks, purchase property, manage taxes, acquire assets, recruit staff, and borrow on Wexner's behalf. That is a load of power to give someone. Wexner then appointed Epstein as trustee of the Wexner Foundation from the early 1990s until his departure in 2007, although reviews found he played no meaningful operational role. Epstein also controlled high-value assets transferred from Wexner, including a New York mansion, a plane, and an Ohio property worth over $100 million. But here's the second of many red flags in this story. No one could ever name a hedge fund. No regulatory filings, no investor reports, no proof of managed capital beyond a single client that was billionaire retail tycoon Les Wexner. So none of these fools, rightfully so, and I'm calling them this rightfully so because y'all got all this money. None of these rich fools did they proper due diligence. Let's get back to this story. What we do know is that Jeffrey Epstein's financial management firm, J. Epstein and Company, was founded in 1988, right around the same time Wexner is giving him power of attorney. Wexner gave Epstein power of attorney, allowing him to transfer properties, manage finances, and even donate on his behalf. Epstein wasn't just a money manager. He was the money. He controlled millions, likely hundreds of millions, with no board, no transparency, and no oversight. To be a silver-tongued, charming white man in America, heck, in the world, is to have everything served up to you on the silver platter, it seems like. Not even one call to his college to verify a degree and he talked his way into these men's lives. This says something about the psyche that exists amongst guys like Wexner and other wealthy men. Shoot, this also reminds me of what's that man's name? Nicholas, I think his name is Nicholas Pugh, or Nicholas Hewitt, or he's the descendant of the Hermes founder. And he made headlines last year after he reportedly planned to leave half his fortune to his former gardener. But apparently his $13 billion estate has disappeared. More about that later. But are these men that lonely? Do they not have active relationships with their kids or their family? What did they see in Epstein that they didn't see in other normal people? What was it? Was it more of a bromance thing that blurred the line? Because let's keep it real. A lot of men are lonely out here, particularly the older ones. But still, there's no excuse to give someone power of attorney over your fortune unless you knew that doing so would benefit you in some type of way. I don't want to sit here and say that they knew everything that Epstein planned to do, but I'm pretty sure they knew the benefits that would come with it. Regardless of whatever public statement they may make or publish, they knew something. So where did the money come from? Right? We're talking about all, and when I say where did the money come from, we're talking about all of the wealth that Jeffrey accumulated. Because even till this day, in his grave, that man is still a multi-millionaire. Look it up. So we're going to go back all the way to 1976 to 1981. Based on his deposition, Jeffrey Epstein's annual salary at Bear Stearns was $42,000. However, according to Epstein himself, the majority of his income at the firm came from bonuses and commissions, not his base salary. He stated that his total compensation in the year before his deposition was over $200,000. This gives Epstein at least 4 years to make a consistent six-figure salary of around $200,000. Now, 1982 to 1991. Around this time, Epstein opened his own consulting company called Intercontinental Asset Groups, an alleged consulting firm which he operated out of his Manhattan apartment. While the exact nature of his business was unknown, Epstein claimed he was a high-level bounty hunter. This is where the bounty hunter claim comes in. So Epstein claimed he was a high-level bounty hunter who recovered lost and stolen money from brokers and lawyers who had obtained it through fraudulent means. Later, Epstein creates J. Epstein and Company, a financial management firm which was formed in 1981, right around the time Wexner is giving him power of attorney. Also around the late 1980s, Epstein briefly worked for Stephen Hoffenberg, the founder and CEO of a bill collection company called Towers Financial Corp. Interesting enough about this, in 1993, Stephen Hoffman would become a convicted Ponzi schemer who would spend 18 years in federal prison after admitting to running a fraud scheme that prosecutors said was then amongst the largest such crimes in U.S. history. Side note, As someone who is referenced as a mentor to Epstein, Hoffenberg's business sold more than 460 million in fraudulent notes and bonds to investors and used some of the money to pay interest owed to earlier investors. According to Yahoo News article, Hoffenberg hired Jeffrey Epstein as a consultant and paid him $25,000 per month. This arrangement reportedly lasted about 6 years. Epstein also received a $2 million loan from Hoffenberg in 1988, which he reportedly never repaid. Some sources suggest this loan served as the foundation for Epstein's wealth. Hoffenberg later referred to Epstein as the architect of the Tower's financial Ponzi scheme, although Epstein was never implicated in it. Y'all, he learned how to be crooked from crooked people. And it was crooked people that gave him the chance to do so. Don't believe me? Just stay with me. Stay with me. In 1991 to 2007, this is where it starts getting good. According to Forbes, Wexner paid Epstein an estimated $200 million between 1991 and 2007. Epstein changed the name of his firm to Financial Trust Company in 1996 and based it in the U.S. Virgin Islands for tax advantages. Looks like Stephen Hoffenberg's mentorship is paying off for Epstein around this time. From at least 2000 to 2007, Epstein chaired a company registered in Bermuda called Liquid Funding Ltd. This entity was partially owned by the investment bank Bear Stearns. Interesting. Where Epstein had worked, according to the Paradise Papers report. And y'all can go look this up. The bank's collapse would help set in motion the 2008 financial crisis. Epstein's offshore company was loaded up with some of the financial products like mortgage-backed securities and collateralized loan obligations. That would become synonymous with the financial excesses leading to the financial crisis. Now, according to the Miami Herald, Liquid Funding had commercial mortgages and investment-grade residential mortgages bundled into complex securities. According to a report, the three main credit rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Fitch Ratings, and Moody's Investors Service, all helped Bear Stearns create the securities in a way that would allow the creative product to get a gold-plated AAA rating. Credit rating agencies, y'all, helped a major financial institution create a gold-plated rated product. Let me tell you something. When certain statements are being published, as far as the damage control is concerned, and you have representatives from these big companies coming onto shows like CNBC, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, and all of them, and they are talking about they didn't know about this, and it looked like we were doing good, all this. Yo, they are all in it together. One of the things I want you to take from the Jeffrey Epstein story is not just how crooked Epstein was, but just how crooked the people and the institutions behind Epstein were as well. Now, around the same time frame Epstein courted Wexner, he also worked with Leon Black, a private equity investor and the former CEO of Apollo Global Management. He served as director of the Black Family Foundation for over a decade, starting in 2001, even after his 2008 conviction, which would later come back to bite Leon Black in the butt for doing so. It is said that Epstein advised on estate planning and tax saving strategies, including setting up a grantor retained annuity trust that allegedly saved Black billions of dollars. He also advised Leon Black on yachts, art, and aircraft management, structuring ownership entities, negotiating transactions, and resolving asset disputes. This all became a part of Epstein's role in the foundation. Black personally paid Epstein approximately $170 million, with internal valuations claiming Epstein provided $1 to $2 billion back in value. This particular relationship lasted until 2017, and by 2019, Epstein gets arrested again. And unfortunately, y'all know what happened shortly after. Oh, and one other detail. The banks, specifically JP Morgan Chase. According to a lawyer for the U.S. Virgin Islands, JP Morgan not only loaned Epstein large sums of money, but also processed over $1 billion in transactions for Epstein over 16 years. Epstein chaired a Bermuda-based company called Liquid Funding, Ltd. Remember I mentioned that? Which appears in the Paradise Papers. Well, this funding in a series of offshore shell companies registered in notoriously secretive tax havens revealed the likelihood that Jeffrey Epstein cloaked his fortune that was made under his financial trust company, LLC, or the fortunes of others. There's a reason why. Remember, you don't just sit up here and tell somebody or give somebody access to your money without knowing the benefit that they can give you back. These men are not that dumb or that desperate. So now, let's take a look at the crimes at hand. So up to 2019, after handling let's up the number, hundreds of millions of dollars, the United States government let Epstein get away with operating as an unlicensed investment advisor, unregistered securities activity, tax evasion, money laundering, wire fraud and bank fraud, and failure to register a hedge fund. There is no record that Epstein ever held a Series 65 license required to legally give investment advice, a Series 7 or Series 66 needed to sell securities and advise clients through a brokerage. There's no record that Epstein held a state insurance license to sell annuities, life insurance, or similar financial products. There's no record of him being a certified financial planner or other industry recognized certifications. In fact, FINRA, the body that regulates financial advisors and broker dealers, has no history of Epstein ever being licensed or affiliated with a registered firm. Let's stay here for a second and really digest the financial crimes committed by Epstein. Money laundering. Now this is what MSNBC claims to have, a breaking coverage of. Violation 18 U.S. Code 1956. Maximum penalty 20 years in prison per count. Money laundering involves disguising the origins of illegally obtained money, and Epstein was moving millions through complex offshore networks, nominee accounts, and foundations with no clear purpose. If those funds were connected to criminal activity, Bear Stearns, anybody? Or if they were intentionally concealed. Hey, Leon Black. That's textbook money laundering. Wire fraud and bank fraud. Violation 18 U.S. Code 1343. Wire fraud 1344. Bank fraud. Maximum penalty 30 years per count. If Epstein lied to banks, misrepresented his financial operations, or used wire transfers to commit fraud, he could have been charged with wire or bank fraud. Examples may include misstating the purpose of wire transfers, opening accounts under false pretenses, and or hiding the nature of client relationships. Why weren't these crimes prosecuted? Epstein was never charged with wire fraud, never charged with money laundering, never charged with tax evasion. So what gives? Let's start with the 2008 non-prosecution agreement. In Florida, Epstein struck a sweetheart deal with then U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta. Hey, Alex. Let's start with the 2008 non-prosecution agreement. In Florida, Epstein struck a sweetheart deal with then U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta. He gave Epstein one count of soliciting, you know what it is. In exchange, he got a non-prosecution agreement with Jeffrey Epstein in 2008. The agreement allowed Epstein to avoid federal charges related to the trafficking, and instead pled guilty to lesser state charges in Florida, which led to a more lenient sentencing. This would later come back to haunt Acosta, resulting in his resignation in 2019. A federal judge ruled in 2019 that Acosta's office violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act by failing to inform victims about the non-prosecution agreement. The deal was kept secret from victims for a prolonged period, hindering their ability to seek justice. That deal likely blocked not just the trafficking charges, but also financial investigations. Why? Because opening his books would have implicated the banks, the clients, and possibly the government agencies who enabled him. But eventually, karma would double back around during the second investigation and imprisonment of Jeffrey Epstein. This time for those that upheld his secrets. Anybody checked on Ghislaine? JP Morgan Chase held his accounts long after his conviction. Internal emails show senior execs warning of reputational risk, but the bank continued. The bank agreed to pay $290 million to settle a class action lawsuit filed by Epstein's victims, who alleged that the bank ignored warnings about the disgraced financier. In 2023, JP Morgan also paid $75 million to settle with the Virgin Islands government over its roles in facilitating Epstein's payments. After taking Epstein on as a client after JP Morgan cut ties with him, Deutsche Bank also settled with Epstein's accusers for $75 million, as confirmed by the victims' lawyers. The bank also paid a $150 million penalty to New York regulators over allegations of failing to sufficiently police its financial dealings with Epstein, among other compliance failures. Leon Black also agreed to pay the Virgin Islands government $62.5 million in cash in exchange for releasing him from any and all liability as it pertains to Epstein. So basically, any potential co-conspirator, aside from Ghislaine Maxwell, was given an option to pay their way out of any serious or harsher punishments for their involvement with Epstein. And while restitution can be seen as a way to atone for one's sins, unless the charge amounts to bankruptcy or disintegration of the enterprise, it usually doesn't stop the action from happening by the hands of other people. If anything, the predator seeps further back into the shadows, and those who are active participants, onlookers, keeper of secrets, become more tight-lipped about it now than before, especially when you realize that the action involves a network of actors willing to play their role all for some kind of benefit. Leon Black, Jess Staley, Les Wexner, these weren't just names in Epstein's Rolodex. They were enablers. The Epstein estate settled hundreds of civil lawsuits, but the deeper question remains unanswered. Who else profited and who else is still protected? Oh, well, let's not forget his team of high-profile lawyers. Alan Dershowitz, a Harvard law professor, emeritus and renowned defense attorney. Dershowitz represented Epstein and participated in negotiating a controversial plea deal, that sweetheart deal, that allowed Epstein to avoid federal charges and serve a lighter sentence in state prison. Dershowitz has publicly denied accusations of personal wrongdoing related to Epstein's activities and has filed lawsuits in response to such allegations. Rory Black, a nationally recognized criminal defense lawyer known for defending high-profile clients. Black was a part of Epstein's defense team during the period of the 2008 plea agreement. Black played a significant role in challenging efforts to overturn the plea deal. Kenneth Starr, the former independent counsel known for investigating President Bill Clinton. Starr joined Epstein's legal team at one point and reportedly was present during the discussions regarding the plea deal with federal prosecutors. Other names include Gerald Lefcourt, a respected criminal defense attorney with a history of representing notable clients. Jay Lefkowitz, a nationally known attorney who, according to reports, played a role in persuading U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta to proceed with the plea deal. And Jack Goldberger, a local prominent defense attorney who was reportedly close with the then Palm Beach County State Attorney Michael J. Sachs. While it can be argued that they all had a job to do despite who their client was, all these attorneys came with their own skills and power to influence and or sway certain things, opinions, and etc. to get the results that they were looking for. When a man can move hundreds of millions through offshore accounts without oversight and then be protected by billionaires and major banks, that's not just a crime, that's a systemic failure. The fact that Epstein passed before trial shouldn't be the end of this story, because his financial trial could still unravel the truth. If we continue to follow the money, we may uncover what the public was never meant to see. Who else is hiding behind sealed files and secret transfers? Why was justice only partial? If we can't depend on the justice system and other systems to do a full audit on themselves to ensure that no misdeeds are coming at the expense of the good of the people, then maybe it's time that we the people do it for them. If you don't take nothing else away from everything that I've just said, know this and understand this. He got away with what he got away with because there were a team of people. There were always someone in his corner that enabled him to get away with it. Point blank in the period. forget about any type of public statement claiming that they didn't know, they didn't realize, or all this other stuff. They all benefited from having this man in their corner some way, somehow. And they are a bold-faced liar if they were to say otherwise. Look at them all crookedly. Give them all the side eye. They all deserve it. This is the second episode of the Ethical Audit. If you like what you heard, and if you want more ethical audits, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Be sure to tell a friend to tell another friend so we can all be friends right here. And I want you guys to listen. Do your due deals, okay? And most importantly, stay safe out here in these streets, all right?